Can Apple school Google with new low-cost iPads? For Tech Republic and ZDNet, I'm Dan Patterson with Larry Dignan and Bill Detwiler. Larry, $299 for the new entry-level iPad. Is this enough to take on the Chromebook?
Probably not. If you looked at Apple's event, they came out with a $299 for schools. There's a little catch to that. And they rolled out a lot of software updates. So, Apple Classroom, there's IT management stuff they added. They added a lot of AR applications. They really kind of leaned into what they're strong at, which is sort of that creative pro market. So they're basically, targeting creativity, all that kind of stuff. Problem is, if you are a cash-strapped school district, the $299 iPad, which doesn't include the pencil, doesn't include the case, and doesn't include another goodie like Logitech came out with this little crayon thing that looks pretty neat. It adds up, right? So you could get a Chromebook for $149 starting price. You can get a Microsoft Windows education laptop for like $159, $169. Basically, the price is comparable. So, the best case Apple's doing is coming in twice that level. And you don't really have that IT management case where, Google can talk lower cost of ownership and all that kind of stuff. So Apple did a lot today to catch up to that market. They added a lot of software goodies. It all looked pretty impressive. And the weird part was like the first half of that talk that Tim Cook and those guys gave really kind of revolved around, hey guys, we're in the education market, we're serious about it. So a lot of it went through their heritage. So I kind of view it as a big catch-up opportunity for them.
Bill, for productivity, what does this new iPad signal?
It's hard to say yet. Like Larry was talking about, you can get a Chromebook or a base model laptop that are convertible. It can be used with Microsoft's education program for less than $200. Now, you may not get the fastest processor or the most local storage, but you can get in the door for, like $179, $189 with products from Asus, products from Acer, products from Lenovo. And they have, being laptops or convertibles, they're going to have keyboards built in, so you don't have to buy the extra keyboard. True, they may not have Apple's pen, but you have to pay extra, for the pen or for this cool little crayon. And so, Apple's event, like Larry said, they paid a lot of attention at the event to creativity, to people using these to write books, people using these to create using them to create things sort of artistically, visual presentations. But, and they said, oh, and if you need a keyboard, here it goes. Now, as someone who has a high schooler right now, and as someone, who that person uses, my daughter uses a lot of software to create stuff for school, she really needs a keyboard. Most of the stuff she's creating is either a paper, it's either a presentation, and that's hard to do without a keyboard. So you still need that. A pen is great, it's cool, but even to code, you're going to need a keyboard. And Apple made a big point about coding and how they're teaching kids to code. Sure, you can do some things with a pencil, you can use an on-screen keyboard, but a hard physical keyboard goes a long way with these devices. The other thing that I think is really interesting is the durability of these devices. iPads have gotten more durable over the years, but it's still easy to drop these things and crack a screen. Now, yes, you could say you could do the same thing with a Chromebook, but with the laptop with the screen closed, you're a little less likely to break that screen because you've got a little more protection there than you would on an iPad. So, I'll be interested to see whether people want to trade in those Chromebooks and those laptops with Windows education for iPads.
So before we get to what Google and Microsoft are doing, let's talk a little bit about applications and software. Larry, there's a big push, like you said a moment ago, the company is leaning into their strengths. One of their strengths is applications, and there was a big push towards augmented reality. Speaking of reality, what is the reality of AR in the classroom and other Apple education and creation applications?
It's not quite there yet, but all the whether you're Google, Microsoft, they're all looking at AR in the classroom, right? You can dissect a frog. That was one of the demos that Apple had today, and you know it can bring art museums to life. It can do a lot of stuff. So it's very interesting from that perspective. I think it's still early days for sure. One thing Apple did that was interesting was, you know, their classroom management apps, their apps for teachers, the coding app, their, you know, teaching coding sort of thing. They're tying that into ARKit. So I think over time that gets pretty interesting. But I'm not sure it's not necessarily an education thing just yet. I think the most interesting thing about this is Apple spent a lot of time on education, and that was their focus of their event. If you look at this, it's like, all right, so the iPad costs $329 now for consumers. Buy the pen, it's kind of interesting functionality, right? So I almost wonder, you know, like I kind of looked at it and go, okay, so I would buy the smaller iPad Pro. Why exactly? So I think that's where it gets interesting, right? So I think, you know, part of this play might just be to juice iPad sales overall.
Yeah, it certainly competes with Apple's own product. Let's talk about Google and Microsoft. Google kind of owns the low-cost laptop market or computing device market with the Chromebooks. Microsoft is introducing a low-cost laptop very soon. Is this enough for Apple to catch up, or will they always be behind Google in terms of cost and utility?
I don't think at scale that Apple can really compete with Google. As a matter of fact, I think at scale, I'm not sure Microsoft can compete with Google because, you know, I did a story kind of comparing the three, the hardware, the software, the deployment stuff. And if you look at, you know, Microsoft's model for deployment for an education, a school district, you know, it's got a flow chart. It's like here and there. It's all these like things and boxes and whatnot. And then, you know, Google Chromebook, it's like, yeah, I just need to figure out how to connect to G Suite. So I think at scale, it's really hard to argue with that, right? The security is kind of taken care of. You know, the way the model works is a school district pays for the Chromebook. They pay an annual maintenance fee. And then if the kid drops it or loses it, they just get a new one, right? So it's from a management deployment perspective, it's really hard to argue with that. That said, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff Apple had today will, you know, appeal to probably private schools, wealthier school districts. But I really think they're kind of betting on things like, I'm going to go out and pay $329 for a laptop or an iPad that has Apple Pencil support, and I'm going to bring that to school. And then maybe I bring that to school and I don't use all the classroom stuff Apple has. Maybe I just use, you know, Google G Suite in the classroom, right? So I think there's a kind of back door to this too, where, you know, they can stay in the conversation in education, but I think the game is really to sell it to students who will bring it to school.
And you know, Larry, that's a really important point because when you're talking about these purchasing decisions, it's either going to be at the district level, it's going to be at the state level. I mean, you're talking about big decisions that have to be made by school administrators, right? So it'll depend on how successful Apple can be is convincing a school district to set up iCloud accounts. You know, they talked about upping the free storage that they're going to provide. They tried to put forward the IT management solutions. But, you know, are teachers in the classroom, if they're required by the district to use, say, something like Blackboard, or if the district uses Infinite Campus. These are other sort of student management systems and portals. You know, if they already have a system in place, sure, it may have an iPad or an iPhone, an iOS app that goes with it, But you know, is it going to be double duty, right, to manage a classroom, to manage a learning experience with Apple software versus, say, what you already have on the books? And you know, school districts are notoriously slow when adopting new district-wide solutions. So you know, I'll be interested to see how you know, how good of a sales pitch Apple can make to those districts to say, hey, I know you're already using Google Docs or, you know, Google Apps to do all these projects. I know you're already using all these classroom management tools to keep your grades, to manage the learning experience. Come over and now use our tools instead. So I think that can be a tough sell.
All right, it may be more Office than education, but Microsoft is also coming into this market with the low-cost computing market with their own products. We all do grow up and leave school, go into the office. Will Microsoft be able to compete here?
I think they will. I mean, in terms of market share from that Future Source Consulting Group, I think Microsoft was like 22% of the market, 25, something like that. So Google's pushing 60. I mean, if you look at Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they basically account for almost 83% of all the revenue. And that's a stat from Frost and Sullivan. So, you know, there's really three big players here. Microsoft's most interesting thing is they've come down on the hardware with their partners to basically match a Chromebook. So that's good. Their main pitch is really Office 365. Right? They're saying if you want your students to have work skills, they need to know Office, which is kind of self-serving, but I can't argue with that, right? I mean, you can do things in Google Sheets, but you know, at the end of the day, if you're really doing something, you kind of need Excel, or you need PowerPoint, or you need, you know, something in Office. So I think that's interesting. And then Microsoft also has these other goodies where you got Minecraft for education, right? So that's interesting. So they all have sort of unique characteristics. And that's what Apple's trying to bring to the party, right? They're trying to bring iPad, you know, Apple Pencil. They're trying to bring some interesting approaches to their apps and things like that. So, you know, I just see the Apple play being more high-end, more consumer student type thing than necessarily a district-wide sort of scale, because it's still going to be twice the cost of what Google's offering. And you know, like Bill was saying about Canvas and Blackboard, I think that's what makes Google Classroom so dangerous, because it's good enough and it's free and it's integrated with G Suite. So, you know, if you're a company like if you're the company behind Canvas and Blackboard, it's tough. I mean, it's a tricky market. So I think that's a ongoing thing, but I mean, I think Microsoft will be fine in certain areas, but I mean, they have an uphill battle too, because it's hard to compete with that simplicity that Google has.
All right, you can find full analysis of the iPad for education by visiting Tech Republic and ZDNet. While you're there, make sure you subscribe to a ton of our different newsletters that will keep you on top of education tech, business tech, and future tech. Also, make sure to read Larry Dignan's full story, how Apple, Google, and Microsoft stack up in education technology, as well as Apple iPad and the new Pencil, $299 for schools and aimed at the Chromebook, both by Larry Dignan and on ZDNet.